When I pulled into my son's driveway that Sunday afternoon and saw the 3 extra cars parked on the lawn, something tightened in my chest before I even got out of the truck. My son Owen had called me the night before, his voice doing that thing it does when he's trying to sound casual and failing completely. "Just come by tomorrow, Mom. Bring those tomatoes from the garden if you have extra." That was it, nothing else. But I know my son the way I know the back of my own hand, and that call was a call for help dressed up in tomatoes. I had given Owen the house 14 months earlier, a 3-bedroom craftsman on Sycamore Ridge Road in Asheville, North Carolina, with a covered porch and a big oak in the backyard that he used to climb as a boy when we visited the area on summer trips. When I found it on the market, I knew it was his. I knew it the way you know certain things without being able to explain them. I had saved that money over 31 years working as a hospital administrator. Not glamorous work, but steady and honest, and I had been careful with every dollar. My retirement account was comfortable, my house was paid off, and I had put aside a separate fund I always called my someday money. I never knew what it was for exactly, just that it would matter when the time came. The time came when Owen went through his divorce at 36. 3 years with a woman who had never been unkind, just deeply incompatible with him in every way that eventually counts. No children, thank God, but the split still hollowed him out in a way that scared me. He moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Charlotte and stopped calling as much. Stopped cooking, which had always been his thing. Stopped being Owen. I spent $219,000 on that house. I had to pull from 3 different accounts, and I took a small home equity loan on my own place to cover the closing costs. I did not tell him until I handed him the keys, and when I did, he stood in that driveway in the August heat and cried like he hadn't since his father passed. "It's only in your name," I told him. "Nobody else's, just yours." He looked at me the way children look at their parents when they finally understand what love actually costs. That was 14 months ago. Now I was standing on that same driveway looking at 3 vehicles I didn't recognize. A Ford F-150 with a cracked taillight, a minivan with a University of Tennessee bumper sticker, and a little red Kia that was parked halfway on the grass. And I felt the first real cold thread of dread move through me. I knocked on the front door because the lights were on inside and I could hear voices. My daughter-in-law Simone answered. She had been with Owen for 8 months, married for 4. I liked her well enough. She had a steady job as a dental hygienist. She was kind to my son, and she laughed at his terrible jokes, which I had long considered a non-negotiable quality in a partner for him. She was 34, smart, and practical, and when she opened the door that afternoon, I almost didn't recognize her face. The woman standing in front of me looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was pulled back in a knot that was coming loose on one side. There was a dish towel tucked into her waistband and flour on her forearm, and she was holding a spatula with the flat, automatic grip of someone who has been holding one for so long they've forgotten it's there. "Alice," she said, and then her face did something complicated, relief and fear at the exact same time. "Baby, what is going on?" I said. She opened her mouth. Behind her, a voice from the kitchen called out, "Simone, the cornbread is burning!" She flinched. Actually flinched, the way you do when you've been scolded too many times and the sound of your own name starts to feel like a warning. I stepped inside. The living room had been rearranged. Owen's grandmother's wingback chair, the green one I had reupholstered myself 3 years ago, was pushed into the corner like it was in the way. There were suitcases stacked against the wall, a duffel bag on the floor, unzipped, clothes spilling out. On the couch, a man I recognized as Simone's older brother Terrence was stretched out watching football with his shoes still on, feet up on my son's coffee table. Beside him sat a woman I'd never met, scrolling her phone. From the back bedroom, I could hear children running. In the kitchen, Simone's mother, Francine, stood at the stove with the authority of someone who had decided it was her stove. She was a tall woman in her early 60s with reading glasses pushed up on her head and the absolute certainty of someone who has never once been asked to leave a room. "The bottom is just a little dark," Francine said without turning around. "It's fine. Don't be dramatic." Simone moved to the oven, and I stood in the kitchen doorway and I looked at the counter. Dishes everywhere. A pot of something boiling on the back burner. Grocery bags that had not been put away. A pile of coupons and receipts spread out next to Simone's purse, and beside the purse, a notepad with what looked like a grocery list in Simone's handwriting, with a total at the bottom circled twice. I looked at my daughter-in-law and I said, quietly, "Where is Owen?" She pointed toward the back of the house. "He's in the, we've been sleeping in the office." I went very still. "You've been sleeping where?" "Terrence needed the guest room," she said, keeping her voice low, her eyes lighting toward her mother. "And my aunt and her kids are in the master. Owen said it was fine, just for a little while." "How long have they been here?" 18 days. I did not say anything. I turned and walked back through the living room, past Terrence and his shoes on my son's coffee table, and I found Owen in the small room at the end of the hall that he used as a home office. He was sitting in his desk chair with his laptop open but not looking at the screen. He was staring at the wall. He looked like a man trying to remember who he was. "Owen," I said. He looked up, and the expression on his face nearly broke me in two. It was the expression of a man who is ashamed of himself, and I have never in 63 years been able to stand seeing that look on my son's face. "Mom, I was gonna call you." "Tell me everything," I said. I pulled the little wooden stool from beside the bookcase and sat down in front of him, just like I used to do when he was small and something had gone wrong at school. "Start at the beginning." He did. It started, as these things always do, with something that sounded reasonable. Francine's lease in Knoxville had ended in early October, and she was between situations, looking at a place in Black Mountain, waiting on a background check, just needed somewhere to land for 2 weeks. Owen had said yes because Simone asked him to, and because saying no to your new mother-in-law 6 months into a marriage feels like a statement you're not ready to make. Then Simone's brother Terrence showed up 4 days later. Trouble with a roommate. Just needed a couch. No big deal. Then Terrence's girlfriend. Then Simone's Aunt Beverly. No, wait, I checked the list, not that name. Simone's Aunt Pearl, with her 2 kids aged 7 and 9, who were currently bouncing on the bed in the master bedroom that Owen and Simone had stopped sleeping in because Pearl said she needed the space. Owen hadn't said anything. He kept saying yes, because Simone was trying to manage her family and he didn't want to add to her stress, and he didn't want to look like the kind of husband who turns away people in need, and each individual, yes, had seemed small enough. The total had not been small. Simone had spent $340 on groceries in the first week, then $290 the second week. Owen had quietly started covering it himself and saying nothing because bringing up money felt petty when people were supposedly in a hard spot. But Terrence had been out to the bar twice that Owen knew of. Pearl had bought herself a new pair of boots. Owen had seen the bag. And Francine had reorganized Owen's pantry without asking, had moved the furniture twice, had told Simone 3 times that the way she loaded the dishwasher was incorrect, and had taken over the kitchen so completely that Simone, in her own home, had started asking permission before she started cooking. I listened to all of it. I kept my face steady and my hands folded in my lap, and I did not say a word until he was done. Then I said, "Does Simone want them here?" He looked at the floor. "She's been trying to hold it together. She doesn't want to cause problems with her family." "That is not what I asked. Does she want them here?" A long pause. "No," he said quietly. "She cried last night. After everyone went to bed, I found her crying in the bathroom. She said she felt like a stranger in her own house." Those were her exact words. I stood up. "Mom, and it's gonna be fine," I told him. "Come with me." I walked back to the kitchen. Francine was now sitting at the kitchen table drinking what appeared to be Owen's coffee from what appeared to be Owen's favorite mug, the old one with the North Carolina mountains on it that his father had bought him years ago. And she looked up when I came in with the mild irritation of a person who has not yet realized the situation has changed. "Well, hello, Alice," she said. "We weren't expecting you today." "I know," I said pleasantly. "Is Simone around?" She stepped up back for a minute, Francine tilted her head. You know, this house is just lovely. Owen is so lucky to have a place like this. My Simone always had good taste. She was drawn to it right away. She did have good taste, I agreed. Owen has good taste too. He picked Simone. Francine smiled like that was a point for her side. I walked to the back door and found Simone sitting on the back porch steps with her elbows on her knees and her face turned up toward the sky like she was trying to find a way to disappear into it. The big oak tree was dropping leaves across the yard. It was a cold, bright afternoon, the kind that looks more peaceful than it feels. I sat down beside her. Tell me the truth, I said. Not what's manageable, not what you've been telling Owen to protect his feelings. The real version. And that was when she started crying. Not politely. The real kind, the held back kind. The kind that comes out crooked and ugly because it's been compressed for too long. She told me everything. She hadn't slept more than 5 hours in a row since they arrived. She was getting up at 6 every morning to shower before Pearl's kids took over the one full bathroom. She had been cooking dinner for 7 people every night while working her full patient schedule, and not one person had offered to help clean up afterward. Not once. Her mother had told her twice, in that particular tone that mothers deploy, that Simone was lucky to have a husband who was so easygoing, implying that the correct response to easygoing was to work harder to compensate for it. Terrence had borrowed Owen's car without asking on Wednesday. His girlfriend had used Simone's good shampoo and not replaced it. Pearl's kids had broken a small lamp in the hallway, and Pearl had said she'd get around to replacing it without any indication of when around might be. And Simone had smiled through all of it because these were her people and you didn't tell your people to get out. And she had grown up watching her mother sacrifice and accommodate and keep the peace. And some part of her had absorbed that as the definition of being good. Simone, I said when she had gone quiet, I need to ask you something and I need you to hear the full answer before you respond. She wiped her eyes and looked at me. Do you know what's in the deed to this house? She blinked. Owen owns it. Owen's name is the only name on that deed, I said. I made certain of that specifically because I have watched what happens when a house has the wrong names on it. I have lived that story myself, 30 years ago. This house belongs entirely to your husband, which means the two of you together decide who stays here and who goes. She was quiet for a long moment. But they're my family. They are, I said, and a family that loves you doesn't make you cry in the bathroom at midnight. Something shifted behind her eyes, a small thing, but I saw it. Come inside with me, I said. We went back through the kitchen. I asked Owen to come in from the office. He stood in the kitchen doorway and I stood in the center of the room, and Francine looked between us with the expression of someone who has just realized the weather has changed. Terrence had come in from the living room, sensing something. Pearl had appeared in the hallway with her 2 kids flanking her like small, uncertain satellites. I want to ask everyone a question, I said in a voice I have been perfecting for 63 years, the one that is entirely calm and absolutely immovable. How much have each of you contributed to this household in the 18 days you've been here? Groceries, utilities, anything at all? Silence. Simone has spent more than $600 on groceries since you arrived, I continued. Owen's car was borrowed without permission. Simone has been cooking and cleaning for 7 people on top of a full work schedule. She has not slept in her own bed in 2.5 weeks because every available room has been allocated to people who were not invited by the owner of this house. Alice! Francine's voice had dropped into a register I recognized as dangerous. I don't think this is any of your business. This house is my business, I said. I bought it. It is in Owen's name, and what Owen decides to do with it is his choice. But what I will not sit here and watch is my son's wife being treated like hired help in her own home. No one is treating anyone like anything, Terrence said from the doorway. We're family. This is what family does. Family, I said, looking at him, does not borrow a man's car without asking. Family does not watch television with their feet on someone else's furniture while that person's wife stands in the kitchen cooking meals for them. If that is your definition of family, then I feel sorry for everyone who has ever been your family. He opened his mouth. He closed it. I looked at Francine. I'm not angry with you, I said, which was not entirely true, but was strategic. I imagine some of this is just habit. You raised Simone. You're used to being the center of your household, but this is not your household. And what I've watched happen here is that your daughter has become invisible in her own home, and I don't believe you want that for her. Francine's jaw was set. Simone is fine. Then ask her, I said. Everyone looked at Simone. She was standing very still beside Owen, her arms crossed over her chest, and she had the look of a woman standing at the edge of something and deciding whether to step back or step off. She stepped off. I'm not fine, Mom, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it did not shake. I haven't been fine since the second week. I've been trying to be a good daughter and a good sister and a good niece, and I've been so focused on not making anyone uncomfortable that I forgot I'm allowed to be comfortable in my own house. She paused. I would like my home back. The silence was total. Pearl's younger child started to say something, and Pearl put her hand on the child's shoulder, and the child went quiet. Francine looked at her daughter for a long moment, and I watched her face do something I had not expected. Not defensiveness, not a counter-argument. She looked briefly, like a woman who had just heard something she had been refusing to hear, but she recovered quickly. I see, she said, setting down Owen's mountain mug with a small, deliberate click. So this is how it is. You invite us here. We come because we need help. And the minute Alice arrives, she nodded toward me with the tone of someone naming an inconvenience. Suddenly, we're the problem. I invited you for 2 weeks, Mom, Simone said. It's been 18 days. And leaving now with nowhere to go, I suppose that's just fine with everyone. Terence, Owen said, and his voice was quiet, but it had something in it that I had not heard from him in this conversation until now. Something with a spine to it. You have an apartment in Knoxville. Terence looked at him. My roommate situation. You told Simone your roommate moved out in September. That was 2 months ago. You've had time to find something. Owen looked at his brother-in-law steadily. I should have said this weeks ago. I'm saying it now. Terence looked at the floor. Pearl, Owen continued, turning to his wife's aunt, I know the timing is hard, but I'll help you look for short-term rentals this week. There are furnished month-to-month units over in Weaverville. I'll make calls tomorrow morning. He paused. But I need you out by Wednesday. Pearl pressed her lips together. She nodded once, shortly. Then Owen looked at his mother-in-law. He took a breath, and I saw in that breath how much it was costing him. Francine, he said, the place in Black Mountain, is the background check actually still pending, or did something fall through? A pause, a long pause. The landlord went with someone else, she said finally, and something in her voice changed when she said it. The edge went out of it. She sounded suddenly tired. Last week, I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be a burden. Owen nodded slowly. Okay, he said, then let's figure out something real. Not staying here indefinitely, but something real. I'll help you look, I promise. But this, he gestured at the packed living room, the piled suitcases, the rearranged furniture. This can't continue. It's not fair to Simone. And honestly, it's not fair to you either, because you deserve a place that's actually yours. Francine looked at her daughter, then at Owen, then at me. I said nothing. This was no longer my moment. I'll call my sister in Hendersonville tonight, Francine said quietly. She's been asking me to come for months. I can stay there while I sort things out. That's a good plan, Owen said. The packing took most of the next 2 hours. Terence loaded up his truck with the particular wounded efficiency of a man who knows he's in the wrong and doesn't want to admit it. Pearl got her kids collected and her bag sorted, and at one point she came to find Simone in the kitchen and said, I'm sorry if I made things hard, which was imprecise but genuine. The younger child gave Simone a drawing of what appeared to be a cat but might have been a horse, and Simone put it on the refrigerator. Francine was the last to go. She stood in the hallway with her overnight bag in her tote, and she looked at Simone for a long moment. I didn't realize, she said finally. I thought I was helping. I know that sounds. She stopped. I know, Mom, Simone said. I raised you to be strong, Francine said. I didn't think about the fact that I was also raising you to not ask for things. She was quiet for a moment. That's my fault. That's something I did. Simone walked over and hugged her mother, and Francine hugged her back, and I stood at the end of the hallway and looked out the window at the oak tree and gave them that. When the last car had backed out of the driveway, the three of us stood in the living room in the sudden, enormous quiet of a house that is entirely itself again. Owen moved the wingback chair back to where it belonged. Simone sat down in it, and she just sat there for a moment with her eyes closed. I went to the kitchen and made 3 cups of tea. It was the least I could do, and also the right thing. Are you okay? I asked them both when I brought the cups out. I will be, Simone said. I think I just need a week of silence and to sleep in my own bed. Then sleep in your own bed, Owen said. Your mother saved us, Simone said, looking at me. No, I didn't, I said. Owen saved you. He found his voice. I just showed up with tomatoes. I had actually forgotten the tomatoes in the truck. I went and got them before I left because details matter. The drive home to my little house in Black Mountain took 40 minutes, and I spent most of it with the radio off, which is not like me. I was thinking about the moment Owen had looked at Terrence and said, "You have an apartment in Knoxville." I was thinking about how it is between a parent and a child, how you spend so many years being the one with the answers. And then one day you realize the greatest thing you can do is be quiet long enough for them to find their own. I had bought that house so that Owen would have something no one could take from him. Land, a foundation, a door that was his to open or close. What I hadn't anticipated was that the door he most needed to be able to close was not a physical one. Simone called me 3 days later, and she sounded like herself for the first time since I'd met her. She told me she and Owen had spent the previous evening cooking together in their kitchen, just the two of them, making his grandmother's pot roast recipe that I had written out for them on an index card at the wedding. She said it took 3 hours and turned out imperfect, and they ate it at 10 o'clock at night standing at the counter because they hadn't wanted to stop talking long enough to sit down. She also told me that Francine had sent a card, an actual card, handwritten, 3 paragraphs. Simone read me the last line. I am proud of the woman you are, even when that woman tells her mother it's time to go home. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said, that's a good mother, Simone. She may have taken a while to get there, but that's a good mother. There is a kind of love that holds on too tight. I know it because I have felt it in myself. The pull to stay, to fix, to be needed. The older I get, the more I understand that the real job is not to be needed. It's to make sure they know how to need themselves. To stand up, to say the quiet part out loud, to lock the door from the inside. Owen put a new lock on the front door the week after. A better one, he said. The old one had been sticking. But I think it was something else, too. I think it was the act of a man putting his hands on the frame of his own house and saying, "This is mine, and I will take care of it." He sent me a photo of the finished lock with no message, just a single emoji. A house. That was enough. I keep thinking about the moment Owen stood in that kitchen and looked at Terrence and said quietly, "You have an apartment in Knoxville." No yelling, no dramatics. Just the plain truth, spoken by a man who had finally decided to stop swallowing it. That's the part I come back to, not what I said, what he said. I drove to Asheville that Sunday because a mother knows. Something in his voice the night before told me he needed help, and I went. But if I'm honest with myself, I also went because I know what it looks like when a kind person starts disappearing inside their own life. I've watched it happen. I did some of it myself, 40 years ago, in a marriage where I kept the peace so long I forgot I was allowed to make noise. What happened in that house on Sycamore Ridge Road was a simple equation, even if it didn't feel simple from the inside. Simone was generous by nature and by upbringing. Her mother had raised her to accommodate, to absorb, to hold the shape of whatever the room needed her to be. That's not a flaw. It starts as a gift. But a gift without a boundary eventually becomes a wound. Francine moved in because she could. Terrence came because no one stopped him. Pearl followed because the door stayed open. None of them sat down one morning and decided to exploit Simone. They just kept accepting what kept being offered, and the offering never stopped because Simone had never once been shown that she was allowed to stop offering. That's how it always works. Not malice, usually. Just the slow accumulation of too many yeses from someone who was never taught that no is a complete sentence. What I've come to understand at 63 is that real strength isn't the loud kind. It isn't flipping a table or delivering a speech. The strongest thing I saw in that house was Simone standing in the kitchen with flour on her arm and tears she'd been holding for 18 days, and finally saying out loud, "I'm not fine." That took more courage than anything I did. I just showed up. She had to decide to be seen. And Owen, my son who spent 3 years hollowed out by a divorce, who I had worried about more than I would ever admit to him. Owen looked his brother-in-law in the eye and told the truth. He didn't do it perfectly. He should have done it 2 weeks earlier, but he did it. That matters. That is what it looks like when a person chooses integrity over comfort, when the part of them that knows what's right finally outweighs the part that just wants everything to be okay. I bought that house so Owen would have something solid to stand on. What I didn't know was that the standing would have to come from him, not from me, and not from the deed. The house is just wood and windows. It is the people inside who make it safe or unsafe, whole or fractured. I can give my son a foundation. I cannot give him the character to protect it, that he had to build himself. And watching him do it, late, imperfect, a little shaky, was one of the proudest moments of my life. I think about Francine too, more than I expected to. She sent that card. She wrote, "I am proud of the woman you are," even when that woman tells her mother it's time to go home. It took honesty to write that. It took something quiet and hard. That is not nothing. People can surprise you. The trick is not assuming they won't.